JDL USA presents Rabbi Nachum Shifren, Torah scholar, author, public speaker, and good friend of the late Rabbi Meir Kahana.
Well, Shavua Tov, welcome back to all that is entertaining and totally worthwhile in the Jewish world, which is us. And never forget what we do here. We are simply promulgating the words and the philosophy and the actions of Rabbi Meir Kahana, alav shalom, our saintly rabbi and Jewish leader. And this week's parsha, interestingly, completely accentuates and serves to give a overview, as it were, of his life and what he stood for by the very first words of this week's parsha in the Torah. Now, as you probably know, this parsha is called PINCHAS. PINCHAS in English roughly is translated as Phineas. And sometimes you'll watch an old Western and somebody will be called Phineas. Who knows where those guys came from? But obviously, the people that cared about the Bible, or that cared enough to read it, were savvy of some of the things that went on. And what do we hear in the very first words of this week's chapter? Let me read them to you. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Eshiva Chamati, Bnei Israel B'kan'o et kinati betocham v'lo chiliti et Bnei Israel b'kinati. Here is a classic case of what's called misirut nefesh, self-sacrifice, where Pinchas was waiting for somebody to take action. He didn't see anybody doing anything. He stepped up. And as it says in the Torah, in a place where there's no man, you should endeavor to be a man. Stand up, do what's right. What happened? There's a monumental thing called Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name, where a princess of the tribe of Midian was trying to seduce a Jewish man and did so in a way that was absolutely abhorrent and so egregious to the point where people were looking at it in horror. I'm not going to mention what it was. You can look at it in the Parsha, but it was a salacious act on her part, meaning that the entire Jewish nation was subjugated to some riffraff that wanted to embarrass and besmirch the Jewish people. As it's known, one of the things that God hates is salacious activities and that sort of thing, especially in public. When something is done in public, for example, I'll give you an idea. It says in the Torah that if someone were to come up to you, right, and say, you know what, I want you to bow down to this idol I have right here, okay? Now, normally that would be a very negative thing. But when you do it, when there's at least 10 people there, and you're doing it in front of an idolater, and you have to say, well, I'm not going to do that. And whatever action he takes, if you can defend yourself, great. But whatever it is, you're not allowed to do that. That's one thing that you cannot do. Whereas this guy apparently, this Jew from the tribe of Shimon, apparently thought that he could do it, and in the front of 600,000 men, women, and children. So we see that Pinchas came in, grabbed his spear, and appropriately dispatched our dear friend. Now, regarding this issue, let's take a look at what's been going on recently in light of what we just learned. We've talked about this on this podcast several times already, but it bears mention again, that this idea of this concept of blasphemy, of making a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name. I mean, each one of us does crazy things. Each one of us does stupid things. I don't know, maybe we forgot to pay the guy that mowed our lawn, but then later on we find out we did, and we pay him. But in the meantime, it's a problem, right? Because you didn't pay somebody for the work that was rendered. All kinds of things. Like maybe you forgot to say a blessing. Maybe you ate a meal. Maybe you, I don't know. There's all kinds of things that we do. We slip up. But a desecration, a desecration of God's name is the most serious thing you can do. That's something you don't want to do. There's three things, right? The Torah says, bowing down to idolatry. And of course, it's been a long day. By idolatry, having sexual relationships that are completely forbidden. Like if you decide that one day you want to date a horse or a deer, that's not going to happen, right? That doesn't work. And of course, the other thing is, which I forgot. It's so terrible, right? See what happens when you get older. But anyway, this concept of the desecration of God's name is very, very important. To the point where you're supposed to give up your life, if need be, in order to not do those things. Right. Or the other thing was, if somebody says, you got to kill this guy, or I'll kill you. Well, then you don't do it. You have to sacrifice your own life, that sort of thing. So, on this very principle, Rabbi Kahana was one of the few people in Jewish history that laid it out on the line. Unfortunately, the state of Israel is not a quote unquote Jewish state in terms of traditional Judaism. It's a mixture of the mixed multitude of different people who latched onto the Jewish people, who have been with us for 2,000 years. Unfortunately, they saw that it was worth their while. It's kind of a thing where it's like being an insider trading kind of a deal, if you get my drift. And of course, there are 2 million Arabs that live in Israel. Now, if you woke up every morning as an Arab to turn on the radio in Israel and you hear Nefesh Yehudi Homia, a Jewish soul yearns to be in the land of Israel, the land of Zion. Well, how would that make you feel? Not very good. I get it. If I was an Arab, I wouldn't feel very good about that either. That's just too bad, right? That's how it goes. And that's why we have the situation that we're in to this day. The amount of blood that has been shed in the last 2 years from this October 7th business is so outrageous and such a horrible, miserable thing. The families, the bereaved families, young people, young women, children that were thrown into ovens, were burned, were charred, people that were stabbed, shot, sexually violated. Rabbi Kahana used to teach us, if you want respect, have self-respect. If you have self-respect, you're not going to put up with this kind of a thing. I don't know about you. I don't know about other people, but there's a lot of people that think like what I'm thinking. They don't say it, but they think it. There's something wrong with the nation of Israel that lets this fester and fester and fester. Meanwhile, the people that were kidnapped are sitting in Hamas jails, rotting away, being killed one at a time. It's something that rips your heart apart. And what do? We send in diapers, food, water, oil, gas, so nobody should go without. What about the people in the Galilee, 30% of the Jewish nation, because of their being living in bunkers for the last 2 years? Their economy's gone south. Dunam after dunam of tillable land in the north has been destroyed by Hezbollah rockets. If I were running things, I'd kidnap one of the head leaders of Iran. Matter of fact, kidnap all of them. We have the power to do that. We can do that. Kidnap them all and say, you know what? You owe us, I don't know, $1 trillion for damages that you caused. You have 30 days to give it to us, or these guys are going down. That's what the Arabs understand. They only understand force. And if you have no self-respect, don't expect anybody else to respect you. This is one thing that Rabbi Kahana taught us. It's called Hadar. It's called Jewish pride. How do you teach it? How do you get it? You get it by reading your Torah. If you read it correctly, all the messages are there. This isn't hocus pocus from some focus group. This is real. And we're dealing with real people, real feelings, and life itself. So this idea of Pinchas being a gadfly, a messenger, a prophet, as it were. And it's interesting, too, that in that same sentence, in that same part of Scripture, it says that Pinchas, he removed my anger against the Jewish people, right? And he avenged my anger. And here, therefore, I give to him the gift of a covenant of peace. What's this about? He grabbed a spear and shoved it through a woman and a man at the same time, both of whom were unclothed at the time, as you can readily imagine. And he's therefore deserving of a gift of peace, of a covenant of peace. That's something you have to think about, right? Peace meaning peace between the Jewish people and God. God was prepared to inflict heavy, heavy consequences on the Jewish people for this desecration of his name in public, right? So peace in this case, in a simple way, could mean that Pinchas was sensitive to the fact that the God of Israel, the creator of the entire world, was very egregious here. Was very totally abused here by the Jewish people. And it took one man. It wasn't Moses. Moses stood there, and we learn that Pinchas was born to do this act, that it was actually his task. Moses kind of like stood aside, didn't know what to do, but Pinchas rushed in and did what was necessary. We go further into the called Pirkei Avot. This week's chapter, Pirkei Avot, is something that we learn from Chag HaShavuot till Rosh Hashanah, right? Every Shabbat we read it. It's filled with amazing gems of human behavior that we need to follow, and all those wonderful things. Tremendous ideas, philosophical ideas here. And it states here in the very first chapter of Pirkei Avot, which is translated roughly means Ethics of the Fathers. It is a tractate of the Talmud, and we read it on Sabbath afternoon during the summer. Shimon HaTzadik, it says, Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon, the righteous person, Haya Misharei Knesset Agdola. He was from the great assembly in the temple. Hu haya omer al Shlosha Dvarim haomed ha'olam omed. The world rests upon three pillars: al Torah, al Avodah, v'al Gemilut Chasadim. There's three pillars. Imagine it's like a stool with three legs, right? Now, if you have a stool with less than three legs, it's not going to stand. But this particular stool consists of the three legs, which are Torah, of course, Avodah. Avodah means service of the heart, or a very typical translation is prayer, right? Service, meaning prayer to God. And then the last thing is acts of kindness. You need to have those three things for the world to exist. Now, some might say, well, it's not pretty unreasonable of us to say that because there's people in Uganda and Ethiopia and China. They don't know. They have no concept of the Torah. Why is it that the world is dependent upon these three things, which have nothing apparently in connection with other nations of the world? Answer: this is going to come as a revelation to some people. Some people it's not. So lest there be any misunderstanding, the world was created, if you learn Torah properly, for the Torah. That there should be a world in which Torah is taught and learned. Prior to the creation of the world, can anybody tell me what was going on? Does anybody know? Let me know through this chat that we have here what was happening prior to the creation of the world. Well, our tradition teaches us that it was God was the only thing that existed. And he decided in his infinite wisdom that he wanted a people to create a world in which people, human beings, called Nivraim, or created beings, that would do his will. Why? He likes people to submit to what he says. Now, if you know, I'm being very simplistic here, but if you know anything about this concept, it's quite deep and it's quite profound. But without these three pillars, there is no world. Now, what would happen if the Jewish people stopped in unison, learning Torah, teaching it? Well, the world would go back to what's called tohu vavohu, nothingness, emptiness, vacuum. Not a very nice thought. So that's why we learn Torah. We learn Torah because we want to connect ourselves with Hashem, with God. Has anybody here ever seen God? Please respond in the chat. Let me know. That way I'll be able to call the insane asylum to pick you up, because nobody has seen God. Nobody can see God and live. That's not how it works. God is invisible, omnipotent, of course, but we cannot see him. How do we connect with him? Through his will. It says in Kabbalah that he and his will are one. In other words, by me doing a commandment that he commands me to do, I'm essentially latching myself on to him. That's a very hard thing to conceptualize, but that's the truth. What about the other things upon which the world stands? We have Torah, which we know means Torah. Avodah, prayer. Prayer just simply means, dear God, thank you for everything you're giving me. That's a simple way of doing it, and that's called prayer. Your prayer means, in Hebrew, means tefillah. If you ever go to the store and your wife or your girlfriend says, hey, we need some pots and pans, you want to look for some Teflon pans. Why? Because they're coated. That coat attaches itself to the metal, right? And tefillah in Hebrew means prayer. We're attaching ourselves to God. The last pillar was acts of kindness, gemilot chasadim. Where do we see this play out? If you look in the book of Genesis to the people in Sodom and Gomorrah were pretty mean people. God created as well during the times of Noah. We know that there was a flood which destroyed the world. And we know that during Sodom and Gomorrah, there was hellfire coming down on those guys, destroying them. But that was subsequent to the flood, in which God swore that he would never destroy the world again. But he did destroy those people. They were very mean, ruthless, and without compassion. And so they were destroyed. So those are the three things that make up actually the life of the universe. As a matter of fact, it describes who a Jew is. A Jew is somebody who learns Torah, prays, and gives to charity, right? There are people that need our help. We try the best we can to help them. Each one of us has gone through things in their lives where we had to rely on somebody else because we couldn't do it on our own. And that's called loving kindness. That's called compassion. That's called gemilut chasadim. So those are the three pillars, and we'll hope that the state of Israel will get smart. As we speak, new revelations have come out that Israel that Egypt is amassing amazing amounts of artillery, weaponry, armies on their border. Why would they be doing that? Seems like they're getting ready for another round. Don't forget that there's been 5 wars between Israel and the Arabs. And the problem is every time Israel wins a war, they lose the war. This war that we're presently going through right now should have ended on October 8th. What do we do to end that war? Put a complete siege around siege around the port of Egypt, also around Gaza. Nothing comes in, nothing comes out, no food, no water, no. This is called war. Again, we recalled our situation with the Allies during World War II. The Allies didn't ask where the Nazis were in order to not bomb hospitals and children's facilities and that sort of thing. They bombed everybody because guess what? They were going to destroy us, meaning the free world. It was now our turn to show them that we're going to win the war. How do you win a war? When they are completely bereft and they need to submit to be subdued. When they raise the white flag, that means they're powerless. There's no more, masao matan. There's no more negotiations. We tell them the nature of the truth, of the peace, which is what we did. When's the last time Israel did that to Hamas or to Hezbollah? They're still getting ready for another round. If there's 10 more people in Gaza, of the 50,000 fighters that they had, if there's just 10 more, they're never going to give up. These are people on a mission. Their mission is Jewish blood. Take care of it. Do it. No, they're not going to do it. This is the message that Rabbi Kahn sent to us, that no more Holocausts, never again. And this is where we're holding. This is what we believe. This is in our blood, in our soul. And the 3 pillars that we talked about are pillars of survival, of the world and us, our national survival. But when it comes to things like war, the Torah tells us, anybody that wakes up planning to murder you, you wake up before he does to murder him. Not murder him, but to kill him. And with that pleasant note, let's wish that we all have peace. Notice that there was a peace covenant between God and PINCHAS. PINCHAS killed somebody and avenged the wrath of God and merited a covenant of peace. That's peace. God bless everybody for a wonderful Shavua Tov. Only good news. Let's really learn from our fathers, our forefathers, who put their lives on the line so that we could live in the light of Torah. God bless everybody. Shavua Tov.